what's up? Avengers Secret Wars leaks. Kang creates Battleworld leading. See what Kang and culturally has to say about this. Check this out.
We're going in 3, 2, 1.
Yo, what is up, everyone? Tay here. I hope you're all doing lovely today. And today I want to talk about pretty much all things Secret Wars, including the recent Secret Wars and Phase 6 leaks that came out not too long ago that are absolutely huge. And I also just wanted to note that I know we've been talking a lot about Ant-Man Quantumania lately, and that a lot of you have been trying to avoid spoilers for that movie. So with the movie coming out this weekend, I just wanted to let you guys know that I am going to avoid getting into any big Quantumania spoilers. I mean, we will be talking a little bit about Quantumania here and there throughout the video, but I'm going to avoid any big spoiler talk. And then the other thing I needed to mention before we get into it is in the last video, I had 2 super thanks questions that I actually saved because they were good questions that I just wanted to devote a little bit more time to. And the first super thanks question was a big one from Jeff, and this one says, there's been a ton of rumors on the Beyonder in the MCU. One where he's a Kang variant, and one where he's a child of Eternity from Thor 4. So what have you heard on this, and how do you think they will represent the Beyonder in the MCU? And then the other super thanks question was from Lipstick Trainface, and this one says, do you still think Battleworld is going to take place in the Void? And I thought this question was perfect for this video because this question is actually in reference to a Secret Wars Battleworld video I put out about a year ago. And today's video is actually going to be kind of like a follow-up to that video because when I put that video out, it was several months before Comic-Con happened, so at that time, Kang Dynasty and Avengers Secret Wars had not even been officially announced yet, so everything was just, theory talk in that video. So I kind of wanted to revisit some of those topics now that we know that Avengers Secret Wars is officially happening. So yeah, thank you very much to both of you guys for those super thanks questions, and I hope you were cool with the wait on those, but I will answer both of those in thorough detail in this video. And I do still have a few other super thanks left over from the last video, but I'm going to save those for the next video so I can, spend a little bit more time on them. And also, of course, if you would like to leave any super thanks questions on this video, then I will get to those in the next video as well. Or just give you a shout out if you don't have a question. And then lastly, before we get into it, if you're a fan of Marvel and the MCU and new to the channel, then you should definitely subscribe because the MCU is what we talk about here. And if you missed any of the other recent videos, you should definitely check those out as well. And the links for all of those, of course, you can find in the description down below. So yeah, anyways though, I think that's it for all of the introductory stuff. So now let's get into it and talk about Avengers Secret Wars and get into these Phase 6 leaks, all that stuff.
Secret Wars.
Marvel supervillains are coming.
Secret Wars.
Can the Marvel superheroes stop them?
Alright, so before we get into the good stuff, first we need to do a very brief overview of what happened in the Secret Wars comics, so we can then use that to set up the rest of what we're going to talk about in this video afterwards. And for those of you who haven't read the comics, there's actually a few versions of Secret Wars in the comics. The original story came out in 1984 and was written by Jim Shooter, and then there's also Jonathan Hickman's Secret Wars from 2015. Then there was also Secret Wars Part 2 that came out in 1985 as a sequel to the original Secret Wars, even though it really didn't have too much to do with the original. And the original Secret Wars story was the first big Marvel crossover story of that size at that time, and it was written as a part of a deal with Mattel to promote this big Marvel action figure toy line.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens in that story, and this is the very, very shortened version, is a bunch of Marvel's most popular heroes and villains from that era are all mysteriously taken to this patchwork planet out in space where a dissonant voice speaks to them from a rift in the sky and tells them that they have been brought there to battle one another, and that whoever comes out victorious will be granted anything they desire. And the voice who is speaking to them from this rift in space is the Beyonder. And one of the main characters in that story was actually Doctor Doom. And what happens towards the end of the story is Doctor Doom ends up battling the Beyonder and ends up stealing his power for a little bit, but ultimately the Beyonder is able to steal his power back and defeat Doom, and then eventually Reed Richards figures out a way to create a portal to take everybody back to Earth. And like I said, that's the very, very abbreviated version of that story. But it's actually Jonathan Hickman's 2015 Secret Wars story that I think will be more important to the MCU. Because while I think that Marvel Studios will probably adapt elements from both Secret Wars comics, I think they will probably adapt much more from the 2015 version. Because for one thing, Michael Waldron, who is writing the script for the Secret Wars movie, has said in multiple interviews that he's a huge fan of Jonathan Hickman's work, and he specifically mentioned Hickman's Fantastic Four run, and also Hickman's New Avengers Secret Wars saga. So with Waldron being such a big fan of Hickman's and him being the one who's writing the script for Secret Wars, I definitely think he'll take more from the Hickman version than the original version. And also, to be honest, Jonathan Hickman's version is just a much better story that's much more well written. And another important thing that will apply to the MCU is that Jonathan Hickman's Secret Wars in 2015 is heavily based on the incursions and the multiverse, as to where the original Secret Wars is more of a cosmic, space-based story. And the 2015 Secret Wars was set up over a span of about 3 years in Jonathan Hickman's Avengers and New Avengers comic runs that heavily revolved around the incursions. And by the time we got to issue number 1 of Secret Wars, there were only 2 universes left in the multiverse, the 616 universe and the 1610 Ultimate Universe. And when this incursion started to occur in those final hours, these 2 universes go to war with each other, with each side trying to save their respective universe. But in the end, both sides ultimately fail, and the final incursion ends up destroying both realities, and with it, the last of the multiverse. But at the same time that this final incursion is taking place, elsewhere, Doctor Doom has laid a trap for the Beyonders because they were the ones responsible for the incursions. So with the help of Doctor Strange and Molecule Man, Doctor Doom is able to steal the power from the Beyonders for himself, and at the moment when the multiverse dies, he uses those multiversal fragments to create a new singular reality, also known as Battleworld.
One reality remains, Battleworld, a patchwork of lands encompassing different salvaged realities of the Marvel multiverse. There, Doom rules with an iron fist and face as the shaper of reality.
But backing up a little bit, back before that final incursion occurred, back on Earth in the 616 universe, Reed Richards had created this giant multiversal spacecraft that he built as a life raft to survive an incursion. But when the final incursion finally took place, in all of the chaos, only a handful of heroes were able to make it aboard. And after they escaped the incursion, they then woke up on Battleworld 8 years later, only to discover that Doctor Doom ruled over Battleworld as its god, known as God Emperor Doom. And it was these 616 heroes, along with some other surviving villains from the 616 universe and the Ultimate Universe, but those characters were the only ones who remembered what reality was like before Battleworld. So once they got to Battleworld, they all end up separating to different areas of the planet, with each one going to raise an army to take down God Emperor Doom so they can then reset the multiverse to how it was before. And that's eventually what they did. Each character went off and raised a separate army in a different part of Battleworld, and then the whole story culminates in this absolutely ginormous final battle that included pretty much every multiversal character you could think of. So yeah, that's basically the shortened overview of what happened in the Secret Wars comics. So now that we have all of that out of the way, now let's move on and we can talk all about the crazy Secret Wars stuff that's going to happen in the MCU, and we'll also talk about these new leaks for Phase 6.
Stephen, your arrival here confuses and destabilizes reality. The larger the footprint you leave behind, the greater the risk of an incursion.
Incursion?
An incursion occurs when the boundary between two universes erodes, and they collide, destroying one or both entirely.
Okay, so in Jonathan Hickman's New Avengers Secret Wars saga, when an incursion occurred, the incursion point was the Earth of each universe. So when two universes would collide, the collision point is the Earth of each universe. So that's why when an incursion happens, you can see the Earth of the other universe approaching in the sky. So when an incursion begins, one of the only ways one universe can save itself is if they destroy the Earth of the other universe. And recently there's been a bunch of different leaks coming out for Ant-Man Quantumania, and also some big leaks for Phase 6 and Avengers Secret Wars. Now, with Ant-Man Quantumania coming out this week, I don't want to get into any major spoilers for that movie, but I am going to reference just one line of dialogue from the recent closed captioning leaks for the movie, where Kang references something important regarding the incursions. So this will be just a very light spoiler, and I'm not going to quote it word for word so we don't spoil it completely, but basically what Kang says in this dialogue is that there are other versions of himself who are messing with time, and that he has foreseen how that is going to lead to endless worlds colliding, and ultimately the death of the multiverse. And I just bring this up because the reason that I think that's important is because it gives us a good idea of what to expect coming forward into Phase 6 with Kang and this multiversal war between his other variants, and how what might be at the core of this multiversal war is the incursions, and part of Kang's role in that war might be to stop the incursions, even if that means destroying other universes to do it. So if that's the case, then how would Kang go about doing that? How would he go about stopping the incursions? Well, if an incursion was happening, what Kang might do is he might just prune one of the incursion universes completely. Because, like I was just saying, in the comics, one of the only ways to stop an incursion was for one universe to destroy the Earth of the other. So we could possibly see that same concept happen in the MCU, where Kang prunes one universe out of existence to save the other universe from the incursion. And in the comics, it was the antimatter injectors that were created by Reed Richards that the characters used to destroy the Earth of the other universe. But in the MCU, with Kang's technology, it could be some version of the reset charges. And this is something I've speculated on in the past, because we know that in the MCU, that the TVA's time technology was originally created way back in the past by a Kang variant. And based off of some of the recent leaks and rumors, it sounds like we might end up seeing the introduction of that Kang variant in Loki Season 2. But the reason I bring up the TVA and their time technology is because it's very likely that the multiversal and time technology that we see Kang and his other variants use in the MCU will be some kind of variation on the TVA's technology. And that will likely include some version of the TVA's pruning staffs and reset charges that the TVA used to prune branched timelines. Because in Loki Season 1, when He Who Remains is talking to Loki and Sylvie, and he's explaining his backstory by showing them these little models of different Kang variants, we see in this shot where the different Kang variants are battling each other that they are all holding their own pruning staffs. So just that alone seems like a good indication that the different Kang variants we will see in the MCU will also have this pruning technology for themselves and not just the TVA. However, in Loki Season 1, we saw that the TVA were using reset charges to prune branch timelines in order to keep the sacred timeline from branching off into a new multiverse. But now that the multiverse once again exists, instead of Kang and his variants pruning branch timelines, they could instead perhaps use technology like the reset charges to prune entire universes. And that's actually an important concept for what we're going to talk about in just a second. But anyways, before we move on, now let's quickly talk about what was in these new leaks for Phase 6 and Avengers Secret Wars. And what these leaks said is that Marvel Studios are apparently discussing turning Secret Wars into 2 movies instead of 1, and also that most of the projects that will come out in between Avengers Kang Dynasty and Avengers Secret Wars are apparently going to be set in the MCU's version of Battleworld. And this was actually something that I talked about in that Battleworld video from last year, because in the 2015 Secret Wars comic series, the whole thing took place in Battleworld because the entire multiverse died from the incursions beforehand. So with the multiverse gone, the only reality left in existence in the comics at that time was Battleworld. So all of the other solo comics and any other comics that were coming out during that period of time also took place within different areas of Battleworld because there was no place else they could take place, and they basically all became Secret Wars tie-in stories. So in the past, I theorized that we might see something similar to that in the MCU, where in that time between Avengers Kang Dynasty and Avengers Secret Wars, we could see other movies and shows that also take place in the MCU's version of Battleworld as tie-in stories to help set up the bigger Secret Wars story. And one of the reasons I think this would make a lot of sense is because it would give some of those characters who might only have a small role in the Secret Wars movie their own side storyline in a different project, so they still have something going on during the overall Secret Wars event. And if what this leak is saying is true, and that we are going to see projects in between the 2 Avengers movies that take place in Battleworld, then I think that is huge, huge news. And I should also say that these Reddit ModQ leaks have a very good track record of being accurate, so I definitely think this is coming from a reliable source. And one of the other things that was included in this batch of leaks was a very detailed description of what was going to happen in the next trailer for Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. And that trailer just dropped during the Super Bowl, and if you look at the leak and you watch the trailer, it is spot on, 100% accurate. Everything that's in that leak is exactly what happened in the trailer. So that makes me even more inclined to look at these Phase 6 leaks for Avengers Secret Wars with more credibility. And like I said, this would be huge news, and if Marvel Studios do end up doing this, then it would make all of Phase 6 into basically one large Secret Wars story instead of the Secret Wars event just being relegated to 1 or 2 movies. However, one very important detail for all of this to work is that Marvel Studios needs to establish a version of Battleworld that exists in the MCU. Thank you.
This is the place where the TVA dumps its rubbish. Everything they prune. And Elias, he ensures none of it ever returns.
Okay, so this now brings us back to one of the super thanks questions I brought up at the beginning of the video from Lipstick Trainface. And that is, what will the MCU version of Battleworld even be? Because chances are, in the MCU, it will go down somewhat differently than how Battleworld was created in the comics. And the reason this question came up is because this was another one of my theories from that video last year, and what I said is that I thought the MCU's version of Battleworld could end up being the Void, which, if you'll remember, was introduced back in Loki Season 1. And the Void is a pocket realm that exists at the end of time, and this is where all of the branch timelines were sent that were pruned by the TVA. That's why we see the remnants of all these different timelines spread across it. But in Loki, most of the Void remained pretty empty because it was inhabited by Eliath, a trans-temporal entity that was captured by He Who Remains to help him win the multiversal war that occurred in the past.
I harnessed the beast's power and began experimenting.
I weaponized Goliath. And I ended the multiversal war.
So, as we know, in Loki Season 1, it was revealed that in the Void, Goliath would feed on all of the people and locations that were sent there. Otherwise, it would have been filled with bits and pieces of multiversal civilizations just stacked around each other. But at the end of Loki Season 1, we see Loki and Sylvie combine their powers to seemingly dissipate Goliath out of existence. So that brings up the question, now that Goliath is gone, what is now going to happen in the Void? Well, we know that the TVA still exists, and we will see them in Loki Season 2, so any branch timeline or reality that the TVA prunes going forward will presumably still be sent to the Void. But it's not just that, because like we were just talking about in the last section, Kang and other Kang variants could also use the pruning staff technology to prune not just branch timelines, but entire universes. So with Goliath no longer in the Void to consume what's sent there, then the Void could just start to totally fill up with entire civilizations from across the multiverse, and all of those multiversal characters and locations could end up just stacking together to create this crazy multiversal patchwork reality. And that is a very, very similar concept to what Battleworld was in the comics, where it was this patchwork world of multiversal characters and locations. So to answer the original Super Thanks question, the answer is yes, I do still think there's a good chance that the Void could be the MCU's version of Battleworld. Now, it might not be that. There's other things I could think of as well, like maybe if Kang is trying to create his own version of the Sacred Timeline, then the Earth of whatever timeline that is could become Battleworld or something like that. You know, this is just a theory. But I do think it makes a lot of sense because Battleworld is a concept that could be kind of tricky for Marvel Studios to introduce in a way that works with the MCU and doesn't seem too cheesy or too unbelievable. But in this case, the backstory and groundwork has already been laid out for the Void to become Battleworld in a way that would make sense and would also seem like a natural evolution of the story. And Michael Waldron was the screenwriter for Loki Season 1, as well as Doctor Strange 2, and he is also the one who is going to write the script for Avengers Secret Wars. So if I'm right about the Void, then it's likely that this has been Michael Waldron and Marvel Studios' plan from the beginning for how they would set up Battleworld for the future. So yeah, we'll have to see what happens, but I think it makes sense, but you know, at this point it's still a theory, so we'll just have to wait and see.
You come from above. Like him. He will burn the world to find you. Who? The Conqueror.
Kang the Conqueror is the new iconic villain in the MCU. Kang is an infinite number of different personas.
Okay, so one of the other Super Thanks questions that kind of started off this video was from Jeff. And he wanted to know what I thought about these recent leaks regarding the Beyonder being introduced into the MCU. And what he's talking about is back in December, some very reliable leakers like My Time to Shine and Daniel RPK posted leaks online that said the villain of Avengers Secret Wars is actually going to be the Beyonder, and that the Beyonder will actually be a Kang variant. And, you know, of course, I don't know if this will be true or not, but like I said, this did come from sources who do have a very good track record, especially throughout Phase 4. And after they put out those leaks, it was then backed up by several other reliable sources who said they heard the same thing. So I do think it, you know, has a good level of credibility and is inclined to be believed for the most part. But it's also worth noting that the Secret Wars movie is far enough away that a lot of what Marvel Studios is working on now could change between now and when the movie actually comes out. Now, the idea of the Beyonder being a Kang variant in the MCU, of course, brings up a lot of questions. Like, is he going to be a totally new Kang variant that is created solely for the MCU? Or will Kang the Conqueror get leveled up with some god-level powers and become the Beyonder? Or will he actually be an alien from the race of Beyonders, just like in the comics? Because in the comics, the Beyonder can change their physical forms, and the character, the Beyonder, appears as human most of the time because his appearance is an amalgamation of a couple different Marvel characters, including Steve Rogers. So it's possible in the MCU that the Beyonder could actually be an alien from the Beyonders who has just taken on the physical form of a Kang variant. Now, that's not the theory I would go for. I think that's probably a less likely scenario, but I do have to throw it out as a possibility. And I do have like 5 different theories written out about how the Beyonder could show up in the MCU and be a Kang variant and how that could work. But it's kind of hard for me to get into all of those theories without also getting into spoilers for what's going to happen in Ant-Man Quantumania. And since I'm trying not to do any Quantumania spoilers in this video, those theories are probably something I'm going to have to talk about in a video coming up after Quantumania has come out and everyone's had a chance to see the movie. However, what I do think is worth pointing out is that Marvel Studios just recently brought the Beyonder character back a few months ago for a brief appearance in the Defenders Beyond comic run, because Marvel Comics are currently setting him up for a big return as the main villain of the Avengers Beyond comic series that is coming out next month. And this comic run, Avengers Beyond, is going to be a big crossover event that is said to be a direct continuation of both the 1984 and 2015 Secret Wars stories. So I do think it's very telling that Marvel is in the middle of bringing back the Beyonder to be the main villain of this big event storyline that is directly connected to the past Secret Wars stories, and that is happening at the same time that the MCU is in the process of setting up their Secret Wars event. Because in the last few years, since Kevin Feige was promoted to Chief Creative Officer over all of Marvel, it does seem like we've seen more of a purposeful connection between the comics and the MCU, where the comics seem to sort of be foreshadowing where things are headed in the MCU. And something else I will mention is that when this leak about the Beyonder being the main villain of the Secret Wars movie came out, I saw some people online assuming that this means that the Secret Wars movie was going to adapt more from the 1984 Secret Wars comic instead of the 2015 version. But like we talked about earlier in this video, while I do think that Marvel Studios will most likely adapt from both of those comics, I do think that they will probably take more influence from Hickman's 2015 version. Because what I don't think a lot of people know is that the Beyonder was never actually shown in his physical form in that original Secret Wars story in 1984. And that the Beyonder wasn't officially introduced in his physical form until Secret Wars 2 came out the following year. So if the Beyonder is going to appear as a Kang variant in Avengers Secret Wars, then I wouldn't be surprised if his role in that movie actually took a lot of plot elements from Doctor Doom's storyline in Jonathan Hickman's Secret Wars. Because like we talked about, in that story, Doctor Doom became a god because he stole the power of the Beyonders, and then he went on to become God Emperor Doom and the ruler of Battleworld. So I wouldn't be surprised if we saw something similar to that in the Secret Wars movie, where Kang the Conqueror, or maybe another variant of Kang, ends up getting some kind of god-level abilities and becomes the ruler of Battleworld like God Emperor Doom did in the comics, but in the MCU it could be more of a God Emperor Kang type of thing. And like I said, I do have several different in-depth theories on how exactly that could happen, but again, we'll have to wait until after Quantumania comes out before I can really get into those without getting into big spoilers. But I will say that regardless of what happens to Kang in Ant-Man Quantumania, just remember that Kang is a time traveler, and that regardless of what happens, I do think that Kang the Conqueror is going to be the villain of Avengers Kang Dynasty. So just keep that in mind.
Kang the Conqueror is the new iconic villain in the MCU.
But anyways, while we are on the subject, another thing I wanted to touch on is Doctor Doom in the MCU. Because for a long time now, I've thought that Doom was going to be the main villain of the Secret Wars movie because he is such a central character in both the Secret Wars comics. However, at this point, it's looking like that is more and more unlikely. However, there have been a lot of rumors about Doctor Doom being introduced at some point in Phase 5 or in the Fantastic Four movie. And I will say that if Doctor Doom is introduced into the MCU before Avengers Secret Wars, then I definitely think he'll still have some kind of role in that movie. Because recently Marvel Studios have hinted that the Secret Wars movie will also feature the return of a lot of villains. So while Doctor Doom may not end up being the main villain of Secret Wars, I could still see him having some kind of important role in the movie, and maybe it could even be a little bit closer to his role in the original 1984 Secret Wars comic instead of the 2015 version. Which I know I keep talking about how I think the movie will adapt more from Hickman's Secret Wars, but this is one of those scenarios where I could actually see them taking some plot influence from the original. But anyways, then something else I also wanted to touch on in this video is the different main characters that we could see in both Avengers Kang Dynasty and Avengers Secret Wars. Because some of the other leaks and rumors that we've heard lately regarding these two movies is that Avengers Kang Dynasty will mainly revolve around the heroes and Avengers of the MCU 616 universe, while Avengers Secret Wars will feature a lot more multiversal characters. And I think this makes all the sense in the world. Now, as far as who specifically the main characters will be in each of these movies, I think that in Kang Dynasty we will probably see the new Avengers team fully assembled. Now, there's been rumors that we will see the new Avengers team come together for the first time in Captain America 4, but if that happens, I still think it'll probably be a more stripped down, grounded version of the team made up of a handful of Earth-based Avengers. But it probably won't be until Avengers Kang Dynasty that we will see the entire new Avengers team all coming together and fighting together for the first time. And if I had to theorize on who will be in this team, I would say it'll probably include past Avengers like Spider-Man, Ant-Man, Wasp, Thor, Captain Marvel, War Machine, Falcon, and maybe Hulk, depending on where we're at with him at that point. But then we will also probably see newer characters that become official Avengers, like Shang-Chi, Shuri, Daredevil, Wonder Man, and probably She-Hulk. So yeah, those are the characters that I could see being official Avengers in Avengers Kang Dynasty. But then I still think there's probably going to be several other characters that could have a role in the movie, but won't be official Avengers. For example, I think that Wanda, Monica Rambeau, and White Vision will probably show up, but at this point it's hard to know what kind of role they will play in the movie. And then I also think that Doctor Strange will probably have a very important role in the film, but it's been made clear that Doctor Strange is not an Avenger, but we'll probably see him fight alongside the Avengers. And then if Doctor Strange is there, then Clea could also show up, because we saw Clea introduced at the end of Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness. And obviously Clea has some kind of knowledge about the incursions, so she could be important when it comes to that. And then the other group that I think will probably have an important role in the movie is, of course, the Fantastic Four. Because the Fantastic Four movie comes out only like 10 weeks before Avengers Kang Dynasty. And the Fantastic Four were very important characters in both the Secret Wars comic runs. So while I do think that the Fantastic Four will probably have a bigger role in the Secret Wars movie, I still think they will at least show up in Avengers Kang Dynasty in maybe a smaller role or, something like that. But I do think we'll see them. And then that's not all, because then besides that, there's also the possibility that some of the younger characters like Cassie Lang or America Chavez could show up in the movie in some capacity. Then there's also the supernatural MCU characters like Blade and Moon Knight that could possibly show up. And then there's also like the Thunderbolts. So yeah, the possibilities for how many characters could show up just in Kang Dynasty are a ton. But I do think that at its core, the main characters of the movie will be the new Avengers team. Now, if those are going to be the characters that we could see in Avengers Kang Dynasty, then there's also the question of who will the main characters of Avengers Secret Wars be? And even though the Secret Wars movie is said to focus more on multiversal characters, I still think there will of course be a handful of MCU 616 characters that will play a pivotal role in the movie. And again, it's hard to theorize on who exactly those characters will be when we're this far out, but if I had to speculate, I think that the Fantastic Four, Doctor Strange, and the Scarlet Witch will all probably have pivotal roles in the Secret Wars movie. And then as far as who some of the more important multiversal characters will be, I would have to say that Hugh Jackman's Wolverine and Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man will probably have lead roles. And then I also think it's very plausible that we will see the return of Robert Downey Jr. and Chris Evans as Tony Stark and Steve Rogers. And if that happens, then I definitely think they will have a fair amount of screen time in the film. And then besides that, I think there's probably going to be a ton of other multiversal characters who show up in the movie, but will probably have fairly small roles or will only appear in the background during the final battle. Because I think in the Secret Wars movie, we are probably going to see almost every hero that exists in the MCU at this point, and then we will probably also see tons and tons of different multiversal characters. But a lot of those characters will probably just appear in the background somewhere on Battleworld, or they could have just like one line or no lines. But just like we saw in Avengers Endgame, in the final battle of the Secret Wars movie, I'm assuming it's going to be just absolutely huge, and that's where we will probably see tons of different characters fighting in that final battle, but that a lot of those characters probably won't have, very important roles in the overall events of the movie. So yeah, we'll have to wait and see, of course, because it's pretty far out still, but I do think it's going to be absolutely nuts. So yeah. You guys let me know what you think in the comments down below, and please, as always, feel free to leave your own crazy theories. But anyways, I think we should call it here for this one because it's going on for a while. I hope you guys liked it. Please remember to like and subscribe if you did, and as always, please share the video if you liked it because that is the best way to support the channel. And I definitely put a lot of time and work into this video to make it a good one. So share it if you liked it. And yeah, I hope everybody is getting ready to go see Ant-Man Quantumania this weekend. I'm definitely more excited for this movie than I've been for an MCU film in a while. And I definitely plan on talking about it afterwards as soon as I can so we can start talking about all these spoilers and what it means for the future of the MCU. But anyways, what am I forgetting? Oh, remember you can find the links for any videos you may have missed in the description down below. There's a couple new ones down there, so check those out if you missed them. And of course, remember to come follow the channel on Twitter. That's the best place for updates, all that stuff, or just to come say what's up. Anyways, I think that's it. I hope you guys liked it, and I will be back soon.
Yeah, please subscribe, like this video, have a great day, and like this video, and thanks for watching, and a great day, like this video, see you guys, bye.